Hello everybody, today we are going to talk about loading data from a comma-separated value file and putting it into a list view with a custom adapter on Android. So the source code we're going to use today is on GitHub. You can find it at github.com/foamy_guy/CSVListExample. So come here and download the code, and then once you get that imported into Eclipse, you can start up this video, and then we're going to talk about what goes into making this example work. So today we're going to use a list view, which we got pulled up over here on the developer site. Definitely check out this page. It will tell you more about list views and adapter views in general. Basically, list view is a view that will make a vertical scrolling list of lots of different rows, and in each of the rows you get to fill in whatever data you want. So they got an example here where they got just some blue bars, but we are going to put some data in here, so there will be words written in it. In order to fill data into a list view, we use something that's called an adapter. Now an adapter, pull up the page for that, an adapter is an object that acts as a bridge between an adapter view and an underlying data for that view. The adapter provides access to the data items. The adapter is also responsible for making a view for each item. So basically, an adapter is what is the glue between some data and a list view, or any adapter view. And in this case, we're going to be using a list view, which is an adapter view. So that's what we need, is we're going to make a custom adapter to load some data into our list view for us. So with that, let's dig into the source code here. And let's see what we got. So I've already got this project imported here into my Eclipse CSVListFun. You can see there's only 3 Java files here to work with, and then you'll also notice inside the assets folder we got states.csv. That's going to be the data that we're using for this example. And then the only other thing we're going to look at is the manifest. So let's start with the data. Let's see what we're going to be loading into this list. So what we got here is a real basic comma-separated value sheet. Each row contains, the first item is the name of a state, and the second item is the capital for that state. And there's all 50 states in here. So this is going to be the data that we're going to show into our list view. It's going to come from this file that we have inside the assets directory. So that's what our data looks like. Obviously, this is kind of a basic example, but this same principle could apply to a more complex comma-separated sheet, or you could pull your data from XML or an SQLite database. There's lots of places you could pull your data from. Today we're going to look at comma-separated value, but these same principles that we're going to cover definitely will apply to other types as well. So the first thing we're going to take a look at here is state.java. This is basically just a class that holds the data about each state. So the only 2 things we have inside here is a string for the name, a string for the capital, and then some getters and setters for all of those. Real quick, let's look at one of these nifty things that Eclipse will do for us. If we erase these, we can actually generate getters and setters with Eclipse. We right-click on these 2 fields here, highlight both strings, right-click on this, and if we choose source and then generate getters and setters, that is a little shortcut way here. You got to check both items that you want, and then that is a shortcut way that you can generate getters and setters for your classes. So that's a cool way to avoid having to type all this stuff out by hand. But that's all that this class holds here, is just a name and a capital. So we're going to make basically one state object for each row in our comma-separated list here. Next thing, we'll jump over to the manifest real quick just to see there's nothing real interesting going on here for this application. Got just the basic stuff, one activity with main and launcher and tip filter, and that's pretty much all we need for this application. Nothing too fancy here in the manifest. So with that, let's jump over to our custom adapter. So this is basically the most important thing for this application. This is what's going to make it work. And again, this is our adapter, so this is going to be what is responsible for taking our data and turning it into views and giving it to our list view so that it can display them on the screen. So we are going to make CSVAdapter is the name of this class, and it's going to extend ArrayAdapter, and then the generic type is state, which, remember, that's the state object that we created right here. So ArrayAdapter is a nice kind of adapter that works a lot like ArrayList, if you're familiar with that. It's basically the same kind of object as ArrayList, but it also contains the stuff that it needs in order to generate views for the list view. So that's the kind of adapter we're going to look at. Basically, we're going to pull all of our data out of here, store it in what is essentially an array list, and that will feed the list view that we're going to show on the screen. So we extend ArrayAdapter type state. We need to have a context so that we can inflate rows. So we will make a context variable there and declare it. We will override the constructor, and we will say we're going to get a context as a parameter, and we're going to get a text view resource ID as a parameter as well. And this is the default basically constructor for ArrayAdapter that we're overriding here. So these parameters actually come from the ArrayAdapter class. We just have to put them into our constructor since we're extending ArrayAdapter. So first thing we do is call super, and then we're going to store the context in our declared context variable up here that we made. So we will store that, and then the last thing we're going to do is call this method that's called load data or load array from file, which is a method we put together down here. So let's jump down to that since that's what we're calling. This is basically just a simple method here that's going to read all of this data out of the states.csv file, and it's going to put it into our adapter for us. So let's see what we got. We got a try-catch block because we're reading from a file. So since we're doing file I/O, we got to wrap it in try-catch just in case anything goes wrong. And we say input stream is equals CTX, which that's the context that we got back up here in our constructor, remember? So we're going to say ctx.getassets.open, and then we say states.csv because that's the name of the file that is inside of our assets folder here that we want to open up. So we got our input stream, then we're going to get a buffered reader, and we're going to pass in new input stream reader with is. So we're basically getting a buffered reader that points to this states.csv file. Then we will declare a string that represents each line, and then we're going to use this while loop here basically to loop through each line of the comma separated file. So we got that while line equals reader.readline, and then so that's going to set for each line in the file, it's going to set string line equal to the current line in the file. And then we check to make sure that's not null so that we know if it is null, that means we reached the end of our file and we want to be done with this loop. So that's what we're checking as our condition in the while. So while the line that we're on is not null, we're going to keep going. So we get a line here. Then we're going to say string array row data equals line.split on the comma. So basically what this line.split does, it's going to return to us a string array where each element is whatever was between the commas. So basically, for an example here, the string array that we're going to get for this first line is going to have Alabama inside the 0 index, and then it's going to have Montgomery inside the 1 index. And since we don't have any more commas over here, that's going to be the only thing that we get in our array this time. But obviously if we had a comma and then another value and more values over here, we would get a bigger array with all the rest of those values, all the ones that come in between the commas. So that's how we will separate our data that's in a comma separated format. So we get that row data. What we want to do then is say state cur, which is that's kind of short for current, equals to new state, and then we will say set name to row data 0 and set capital to row data 1, because that's the order that they show up in inside the states file. We got the name and then the capital. So now we have a state object that is set to the information that's on the current row of our CSV file that we're looking at. So what we want to do with that is say this.addCur. So this is going to refer to our self, which is the CSV adapter, and since it works a lot like ArrayList, it has an add method that we can use to add items to the array adapter, basically. So we add the state that represents the current line, and then because we're in a while loop here, it's going to read every single line out of the CSV file and do the same thing for each of them. It's going to load them all into the adapter. So remember that load array from file, that was the last thing we did inside of our constructor. So that's basically going to populate our data for us out of that CSV file. The only other thing that we have inside this adapter, and what is probably the most important part of it, is this public view get view method. This is a method of adapter, and we're overriding it, so we got the override thing up here. Basically, this is the view that's responsible for taking the data for this position, whatever position we get as a parameter, and building it into a view and then returning it so it can be shown on the screen. So this is kind of the meat of the adapter. This is the most important thing. So the first thing we want to do is we're going to say text view mView equals text view and convert view. So convert view, that's something that we get up here, and that's a parameter that gets passed to us. What that is basically for a list view, whenever a view scrolls off the top of the screen and we're no longer using it, it's instead of creating a new view for every single row, we like to reuse those ones that have scrolled off the top and aren't being shown anymore. So the system will send those back to us. It's almost like it's sending us recycled views with this, ones that no longer are needed on the screen. It's going to send it to us so that we can use that instead of creating a new one. And the reason for that is creating a new view every time is a fairly costly thing to do. So it's nice to reuse them instead of having to create new ones. And then the last thing we get is final view group parent. So parent in this case is going to represent the whole list view. Convert view again is going to represent any view that's available that's already scrolled off the top or the bottom of the screen and is no longer being used because it's not on the screen. So first thing we want to do is we're going to say mView equals text view cast of convert view. And then what we want to do is check, is the mView null? So basically we're doing the same thing here to check to see if the convert view is null. Because if there's no recycled views for us to use, then the system will return to us null in this parameter. But if there are recycled views, then it will give us one of them. So we check to see if it's null, and if it is, then we do unfortunately have to make a new text view. So that's what we're avoiding is we don't want to call this new text view for every single row in the list, which is in this list we got 50 states, there's 50 rows. If we weren't using this recycled convert view, then we would have to make a new text view, 50 of them. But instead we only have to make enough that they fill up the screen, and then we start reusing them. So we say mView, in the case where it is null, so there weren't any recycled ones, we say mView equals new text view, and we say parent.getContext, because when you make a view with a constructor, you have to give it a context. So we're going to use the context that comes from this parent view. Then we say mView.text size equal to 28, just so we got some bigger text there. And that's all we need to do. That's going to cover creating new views for us when the one we got back from the system was null, which means there wasn't one for it to recycle to give back to us. So we have to create a new one. And then the next thing we do is we say mView.setText equals, or we pass in getItem, which is a method of ArrayAdapter, which works a lot like in array list. This would be just .get, but in ArrayAdapter it's called .getItem. So we say get item, we pass it the position that we got passed as a parameter for getView. So it's basically saying whatever row we're trying to make, it's going to return to us that position here. So we're saying we want to get the item in our array that's at that position. So we get that, and then we say get name. So basically we're going to put the name of the state to be shown in that row on this text view here. So the only other thing we have in here is actually commented out, and this is a way where we could handle the click events inside here for each row if we wanted to. But for now, we got this commented out, and we're going to handle the click events actually inside the activity. So we'll leave that commented for now, but this is just so you know we could handle it inside this getView method by attaching a listener to each of our text views if we wanted. The last thing we got to do is just return InView, because remember this is public and view, so it returns a view object, so we want to return the view that we just made and populated. And that is it for the getView method. And then that's the only thing in this adapter. So that's all we got to do here. Let's take a look at our activity. And first, let's look at the layout for it. You can see we got a pretty basic layout here. It's just a parent relative layout, and then inside there, the only thing is a list view with an accidental quote behind there. So let's erase that. Only thing we got in there is just a list view. So let's check out main activity, see what we got going on inside here. We will declare an adapter that we're going to use, and then inside of onCreate, we'll say set content view r.layout.activity main. That's the layout we just looked at back here. We will look up our list view with find view by ID. And again, that's this list view right here that we got highlighted. So we're getting a reference to that using find view by ID, and then we will say we want to create our new adapter. So we say imAdapter equals new CSV adapter, and we pass it a context, which is this, and then we have to pass it an int also, because remember back here on our overridden constructor, it's expecting a second parameter here, and this is you have to pass this in because ArrayAdapter's constructor is expecting it. In this instance, we're not doing anything with it, but we do have to pass it in, so we'll pass in a -1 just because that's a nice sort of dummy value, just so we know, we're not using it, but we do have to pass it in. And then once we get our adapter, the only thing left to do is imlist.setAdapter with that adapter that we just created. So that is gonna, these lines right here are gonna take care of getting all of our data out of that CSV file and then setting it into our list view so it can be shown on the screen. And then the last thing that we're going to do inside the activity here is say imlist.setOnItemClickListener. So this is basically we're setting a listener that's going to get called anytime a row in the list gets clicked on. So in this instance, the only thing we're going to do is just say make a toast and show it with the capital of the state that's in the row that was clicked. So if everything goes according to plan, you should be able to click a row, and then the toast will pop up to show you the capital for that state. And that's really about it for the source code here. So let's check it out on the emulator. I got it loaded up here, and you can see we got a list that's got all of our states in it. They happen to be in alphabetical order. That's just because that's the order that they were listed in the file. If we had them in a different order in the file, they'd show up in a different order here, but we could use like the collections object or something to put them in whatever order we want. But for now, they're in the same order they were in the file, which happens to be alphabetical. And you can see we got the whole list here. It scrolls kind of slow on the emulator, but on a device, this is nice and smooth. And part of the reason for that is because we took advantage of that convert view recycled view. If we hadn't done that, then this will actually, even on a device, it will scroll pretty choppy because that new text view, having to create a new one each time, takes up more resources than it does to reuse them. So you definitely want to use that convert view to keep your list view scrolling nice and smooth. But you can see we got the list here. The state names populated just fine, and we'll go ahead and click on one, Montana, and you can see we got the pop-up there that tells us the capital. So we'll click on one more here. We got Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. And that is that's going to be it for this tutorial today. I hope you guys enjoyed it and learned something. And I hope you're able to use the knowledge that you got kind of to adapt it to your own, hopefully more complex problem than we're showing here today. Until next time, that is all, and thanks for watching.